Now let's try to quickly revise how we actually created our first API that was actually interacting with a database. Okay. Now, first of all, to set up the database, what we did was we installed MySQL 2. MySQL 2 is kind of like a driver that can help us to connect to the MySQL server. It's kind of like when you have Windows drivers for display driver or sound driver in Windows, they actually help you to interact with the sound hardware or the display hardware of your system. Same concept of the driver exists here as well. They will actually help you. This MySQL 2 driver actually helps you to set up a connection between your process and the MySQL server. Apart from that, we used an ORM, Object-Relational Mapper, called as Sequelize. What is the use of ORM? The use of ORM is that we have relational tables in the databases, but in programming constructs, we are more familiar with classes and objects. It actually helps us to map the relational, I would say, concepts to the object-oriented concepts. So that's why we call it as Object-Relational Mapper, that any relational entity is mapped to an object. So we installed both of them. Then first thing that we did was we created a dbconfig file. Inside the dbconfig file, we took the Sequelize library, right? From our environment variables, I got db name, db user, db password, and db URL. You can check. These are the environment variables. Okay. Then this Sequelize has to create a new object. If you create a new Sequelize object, this calls the Sequelize constructor. It takes 4 arguments. First 3 are the db name, the db user, the db password, and an object. Inside this object, you have to tell the host on what URL your MySQL instance is actually hosted. And in the dialect, you have to mention MySQL. What is this dialect? So Sequelize can not only be used for MySQL, it can be used for any RDBMS like Oracle, PGSQL or anything. So to mention what kind of an interface we are interacting with, you have to mention dialect. If it is PGSQL or Oracle, you have to change it accordingly. And then you are going to export the Sequelize object altogether, right? Cool. Now, then once we have Sequelize set up with us, what we are going to do is we actually went and created a model. This model file is going to be created something like this. So we again get the same Sequelize library object and we get the DB object. This is the Sequelize object that we constructed here. The new Sequelize object that we created and exported. This DB object refers to that, and this Sequelize refers to the Sequelize library object. Then this DB object has a function called as define, where you can pass the first argument as the name of the table. It will automatically pluralize the table. This is singular. Internally, it will create categories, that is the plural. And you have to pass an object corresponding to this. Inside this object, you have to mention that what should be the properties of this table, or you can say what should be the columns of this particular table. So for example, we need a column name, we need a column description. Now every column is going to have a type. So you can see we have a type here, and then you can see allow null false. So what is this? It says that name has a type string and it can never be null. And how do you get the type? So this Sequelize library object has different types. So you have to mention one of the types, and you can mention more properties. I'll show you how you can mention more properties here. Then there is description, right? This description also does the same thing. And this db.define actually creates a model object for you that you export here. Now using this model object, you can actually query any table inside the database. So actually I mentioned, right, that in the repository and repository layer and the model layer, you can do two things. Either the model will be connecting to the database, and in the repository layer, either the model will be connecting to the database and it will be showing how the database looks like. And in the repository, you will be having the logic to query the database. Or in the repository only, you have the logic to connect to the database and query the database, and the model just have the logic to represent how the data looks like. So if you remember, when we were not using Sequelize and we were making raw SQL queries, at that point of time, all the connection logic could have gone inside the repository layer. But now because we are using Sequelize, so connection logic we do not need to bother about because models can automatically take care of that. Once we have the model here, we go to a repository and we created category repository. This category repository class, let's say, has a function create category. It takes a name and a description, and we import the category model, and on the category model we say category.create. We pass the name and the description, and it is going to create a new category for us. If there is any error, for the timing, I've just console.log that error. We will do the error handling shortly. Okay, cool. Once done, we go to the service. Inside the service, we have category service. This category service will be taking some repository. Now this repository can be connecting to the database, or it might be connecting to some third party like fake store, anything. And we will expect that this repository is going to have a create category method, right? Because we are not using TypeScript, so we cannot define the type of repository or the interface of the repository. But if you are using TypeScript, then of course you can actually do that kind of restriction that people cannot use any repository that they want. But for the timing, we will say that we are having a strict contract that our repository will be having a create category method. In that, I am getting a category object. From that category object, I'll pass the name and the description. And whatever the repository will create for us, we are just going to return that. Then we will come to the controllers. Inside the controller, I will call my category service. You can see I created a new category service object, and inside that I pass a new repository object, right? And you can see inside the category service, we have a create category method. We pass the request body to that. Once we have a response, we return the response. Once the controller method is set up, we go to the routes, v1 routes, and we say that any / categories related routes are going to be handled by category router. Inside the category router, we had a post method, which calls the controllers create category method. As simple as that. Currently, few things are missing in this implementation. What are those? That is middleware layer validation and better error handling. Those two things are missing. We are going to handle that. Don't worry in a moment. Right. But what I want you guys to do is that you know now how end-to-end an API looks like. I want you guys to see that in the category repository, I've already implemented a bunch of methods. That is get categories and get category. Get categories help you to get all the categories, and get category helps you to get a particular category by the primary key ID. So I want you guys to implement two APIs. Pause yourself here. Think about it. That how can you implement two APIs that look something like this? That looks something like this. So it should be a get request to /API /v1 /categories /:ID, and this is going to return you a category with a particular ID, and again a get request to /API /v1 /categories, and this will return you all categories, right? So you have to write these two APIs. And try to test them whether they actually work or not. Pause yourself here. I know you guys can do it. If not possible, or if you have some doubts, of course I'm going to implement it, but giving it a shot is definitely going to worth your time. So now what we are going to do is we are going to fill in a bunch of more APIs, right? What I am going to do is I'll bring up my MySQL workbench, right? And I'll say, let's see, what's the name of the DB? I guess this is shopcart, right? Shopcart demo DB. So use shopcart DB. Okay. And we'll say select star from categories. If you run it. Now currently you must be able to see that we are having multiple categories of the same name. Technically, we should not allow that. We should not allow multiple categories to have same name, right? So how can we handle that? First of all, we can say delete from categories where ID is equals to 1. Okay. So we are going to delete the category with ID 1. Run it, worked successfully. Oh, sorry, my bad. This is categories. Okay. We have 3 categories. Now, if you delete one of them, now you can see we have 2 categories, right? So we should implement our API in a manner that we should not be implementing or we should not be passing on names which are already present in the database. How can we handle that? So this thing can be handled inside. If you carefully go here, now you can see that we are doing DB sync. When you do DB sync, then all the changes in the I would say models and everything are actually implied. So in the name, what you can do is there is a property called as I guess there is a property called as unique true. Let's just quickly Google that up, right? Unique true you can pass in SQLize, but let's just confirm. Unique SQLize model. Okay, validations and constraints you can see. So you can see you can pass something like unique true, as I mentioned. So you can say unique true. Okay, so name of the category is always going to be unique. Let's do one thing. Let's turn up the server now. npm start. Okay, it says one server is already running at port 3001. So I know which one is that. I'll close it. And let's retry the server now. Okay, cool. So you can see the server is up. Now let's try to open Postman. Okay, and now let's try to create a category. Okay, so you can see this was the new request. Let me name it as create category. Okay, save it, and let's name the category. Let's try to make one more category with kitchenware. If you try to send it, okay, it says created category. One second, let's go up here. Let's do select star from categories. Okay, cool. Now you can see we are still able to make kitchenware again. Now why is that? If you do describe categories, then you will realize one thing, that on the name there is no uniqueness, no unique extra property has been added. Why is that? Because the db sync call has some properties that you have to keep in mind. So if you search for sync, okay, so you can see db sync actually has multiple options, right? So if you put something like force true, right, if you have a model, if you have changed a model and on that model you do a dot sync and do a force true, this creates a table, dropping it first if it already existed, right? You can see alter true, this checks what is the current state of the table in the database, right, and then performs the necessary changes. It doesn't drop it. Okay, synchronizing all the models at once, this is what we are doing. db.sync, this is what we are doing. If you pass force true, then what it will do is it will drop all the tables and recreate them. So let's try doing one thing. In the index.js, let's pass alter to true. Okay, let's pass alter to true. Let's see if it works for us or not. I saved it. And now if I go to the terminal, now you can see what's happening. There is an error that came up. Okay, there is an error that came up. And yeah, let's see this. Alter table categories, change name, not null and unique. So you can see it actually tried to make changes to the table. It actually tried to make changes to the table. Okay, but it actually came up to an error. What error? The thing is, now because we have a record inside our categories table that is not following this constraint, right? So what's happening is inside our categories table, I have two kitchenware. Now I'm trying to apply this alter true, this db sync alter true. What alter true is doing is, if any changes in the model is happening, it's trying to replicate that changes actually in the database, but it is not able to do that. You can see it actually run the command alter table. It actually run the command alter table categories, right? But it's not able to do that because it's already having two kitchenwares which are violating this property. So let's do one thing. Let's delete one of the kitchenwares. 4. Execute it, works. Now I do select star from categories and you can see now this thing is available. Now let's try to restart the server. Let's try to now restart the server. And this time you can see alter table worked. This time alter table worked because now there is no, I would say, category that is violating this property. If now you do select star, you can see all the records are as it is there. But if you do describe, now you can see the name has a uniqueness of the property. And now if you try to run the same API, can you see we were not able to create the category. We are not getting the correct error messaging because we have not done the exception handling yet. But if you do select star from categories, you can see we have not created the duplicate category. If now we have to change the category, then what do we have to do is, let's see what category we can name. So let's say let's make a category with the name jewelry. Okay, jewelry or jewelry like this. Jewelry related product, send it. And you can see this time it created jewelry. Select star from categories and you can see now jewelry has been created, right? So now we have actually applied constraints on inside our, you can say, database that the name should be unique. So all you have to do is, if you are making any changes to the model, you have to just run db.sync alter true. It will automatically detect are there any changes that are expected to happen with the model, and then apply that, right? So I'll commit all of this up till here. Git add all, git commit -m, added unique constraint to category name and synced with alter true. Git push. So now we have our create category API working, right? Now let's try to implement a bunch of more APIs that are going to be helpful for us in the overall implementation. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that we are able to get some categories as well, right? How the get API should look like. Let's start implementing that. Okay, cool. So let's first of all implement get all categories. If you go to the category repository, file, I've already implemented a function get categories. What it does is it calls category.findAll. Find all is going to technically do select star from categories, something like that. Okay, cool. So now what we can actually do is, let's go to category router. Inside the category router, or let's first of all go to service. Let's go to category service. Inside category service, I'll say async get all categories, and we are just going to call repository dot get all categories. We don't need to pass any argument. Save it. Then let's go to the controller. Okay, and here in the controller we are going to implement this same method, create category, like this here. Okay, we'll say category service dot get all categories. We don't need to pass any request dot body or anything. This is all that we have to do, right? The method name we just should make it get all categories, and get all categories, comma get all categories. Once done, let's go to the routes, category router, and now here we are going to register our get all categories. How do we do that? We are going to have a get request, and we'll get all categories from the controller and map it here. That's it. I guess we are good to go. So the server is already up. Let's open Postman, and now let's try to make another request. Get all categories. Okay, I'll say localhost 3001 / categories to a get request, send it. Okay, it's halting somewhere. Let's see if there is any error. Yep, there is some error. It says get all categories is not a function. 1 second. So inside the service, it was not able to find get all categories. Let's see what is in the repository. Oh, it's get categories, not get all categories. So let's rename that get categories. If now you send it, you can see we are able to get all the categories altogether. This is looking definitely great, right? Because now from our database, anyone can come up and actually fetch all the possible categories, whatever they want, right? So what I'll do is I'll create one more category, right? So let's say I'll go to create category. I'll create a category men's clothing, and I'll say men's clothing related products, send it. You can see men's clothing is done. I'll also make women's clothing, send it. And now if I do get all categories, you can see we are able to get men's clothing, women's clothing, everything as well. This is looking fantastic. And now what we can even do is we can also implement one method, get category. We can implement a method get category, which is going to call get category method from the repository. So if you see the repository, we have a get category method. This is going to take a category ID. Let's say category ID. And we are going to pass the category ID here. Similarly, in the controller, we'll go and without much of an effort, we'll make a get category method. This is going to call get category with request.params.id. Okay, and that's it. The response code should be okay here, and here as well it should be okay, and it should be okay. It should be okay, right? And let's see. Let's go to the v1 routes. This time I'm going to have, after the slash there can be an ID. So it's a variable quantity, it's a params, request params. So I'll put colon ID, and here I can get, sorry, in the controller, let's go to the controller. In the controller, let's export it. So I've exported it, and now in the routes, let's import it. Get category. So I'm importing in the routes and pasting it here with the get request. And now let's make another request, get category. Okay, I'll take the same URL. And now if I do /2, send it, you can see we're able to fetch the details of the category, right? The messaging could have been better. Let's improve the messaging there. Instead of saying reason phrase okay, I'll say fetched category. Successfully fetched category. And above as well, I can say categories. Save it, send it, successfully fetched category, right? If let's say you do /5, now you can see the data is coming as null because there is no category with the ID 5. If you carefully see here, select star from categories. There is no category with the ID 5. So the next step should be that we should be able to do better error handling. In case we are not able to find something, there should be proper error handling that should be done. But for now, this much definitely looks good. I'll say git add all, git commit -m, added get category and get all categories API. Here we go. So now what we are going to do, we are going to implement an API to delete a product. Now for that, we don't have a repository method yet. You can see there is no repository method to delete a category. So what we can do is we can say async destroy category. Okay. And we'll get a category ID here. Same thing I'll do try catch. As I said, error handling will do later. Right. And let's see, do we have any method in SQLize? So if you go for SQLize queries, okay, or you can just Google it, delete record SQLize, delete queries. You can see if you want to delete a single row, if you have the access to that object. So whenever you call user.create, it will give you a user object. On that object, you can directly call a destroy. Or you can say model.destroy and put the where condition. Okay. You can do a destroy all to delete everything, right? So on and so forth. So let's try to use something like this. Okay. So we will say, and let's see. Okay. Let's see this here. We'll say category.destroy, and you can see how we put the where clause in the object. See, destroy function takes an object. In that object, you put a key where. This is going to put your where clause. So it's kind of like saying delete from user where first name is Jane, kind of like this. Okay. So, and again, you don't have to like always remember all of these syntaxes. You can just refer the documentation. So if we can say where ID is the given ID, or let's name that given ID as category ID. So where ID is the category ID. Okay, cool. Now we have the repository method with us. Let's go to the service layer. In the service layer, I'll just copy, paste, destroy category, and we'll call destroy category with the category ID. Okay, you can see destroy category. As simple as that. And then what we are going to do, we are going to go to the controller. In the controller, we are going to have the same method, this time calling as destroy category. We'll call destroy category here. Okay, and again we are going to pass the request.params.id. This time also we'll say status okay, and we'll say successfully deleted category. Okay, we'll export destroy category. We'll go to the routes. You can see pretty redundant stuff. You don't have to bang your head in the wall to implement this. You can say category router dot delete. So delete request. The route is :id, and let's get destroy category. Destroy category. Save it. The server must be still up. You can see the server is still up. Let's try to delete kitchenware. Okay, so I'll have a new request, delete category, and I'll copy this, paste it here. So kitchenware has an ID 3. I'll send a delete request, send it, and you can see successfully deleted category. If you are able to successfully delete something, it returns you the data as 1. So the SQLize returns you kind of like a 1 to denote true the value that the operation is successful, right? And now if you do select star from categories here, you can see that category is gone, right? So we have very easily implemented the delete category, or I would say the delete API as well. Added delete API. Here we go.